Welcome to the Dynasty Effect, where the legacy of the Clash of Dynasties docuseries doesn't end, but continues.
This is a podcast that puts it all together, you know?
This is the Dynasty Effect.
Welcome to the Dynasty Effect podcast. I'm your host and executive producer, Ben Hada, and with me, as always, is Frank Favaro from Walsh Jesuit and president of Serve Centric. Frank, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Ben. Doing good, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I mean, we got a great guest, so we'll just jump right into it. I know you know more about this guest than I do, Viktor Sveda, but I tried, as hard as I could to get as many of our guys in the docuseries as possible, but not everyone was available. But I know that he was part of the Dynasty. He was a little bit of a latecomer. But why don't you tell me a little bit about what you know of Viktor?
Yeah, Viktor came in, transferred in from a local public school, Revere, and he came in. I was a senior, and Viktor was a junior, and he transferred into Walsh. And, just one of the guys that raised the level of our room for the fact of his work ethic and, just his drive, to be great. One of the hardest working guys I've ever been around. So excited to have him on today.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I want to hear more about that too when he comes on, but we'll jump right into it. Everyone, welcome to the Dynasty Effect podcast, Viktor Sveda.
Looking at Viktor Sveda.
Viktor Sveda.
Viktor Sveda.
Viktor Sveda.
Sveda.
Sveda,
the warrior
of Walsh Jesuit.
From Peninsula, Ohio.
State champ at 215.
Rated number one in the nation. What a good looking athlete.
First points of the match going to Sveda.
Nice finish.
He's headed off to the University of Indiana after high school.
Viktor Sveda of Indiana.
Reversal by Sveda. Four-time NCAA qualifier.
Two-time All-American.
Long-time coach as well.
One of the best wrestlers who made music.
But on the mat, he is a killer.
We're going to get a fall here. That's what he's known for.
This should be over. This should be it. This will be it. It's got to be it. There it is.
That's it.
And that's it.
It's over. It's over. Sveda.
Viktor Sveda.
Viktor Sveda.
Viktor Sveda.
Sveda.
Viktor.digital. I'm Viktor. Peace.
Yay, Viktor!
Viktor, nice to see you again, buddy. How are you?
Great to see you guys. I'm doing well.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. I know it was tough tracking everybody down, wrangling everyone for our interviews for the series. But this is what this is about, to try to tell more stories, find out where everyone's at, what they're up to. So where do we find you these days?
I'm actually in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Hoboken, East Coaster. All right.
Yeah, so I've been out here for quite a number of years. I try not to count them up. I help manage a gym, the Edge Wrestling Gym in Hoboken. We get a lot of the Columbia RTC trains through here. And we have an adult and kids program, and just staying connected with the sport in that way. And then I also play a lot of music and do that. So this is a good area for that kind of thing because it's all over here.
Vic, I want to ask you first off, good to see you, buddy. What'd you think of that intro video?
Yeah, it was interesting. I hadn't seen a lot of those in a long time. So it's good to, I recognize that guy barely, but he's there under his song. So.
And the second thing I want to ask you real fast is you probably have to be the greatest wrestler musician of all time, right? There can't be I don't think there's been a better wrestler who's ever become a musician that could ever beat you on the wrestling mat.
Well, I don't know, but I'm working. I work as hard as I do in my music as I used to on my wrestling, and it fills the void nicely. It's a great, and it's not as taxing, although your fingers get a little on that guitar.
That's funny. First of all, we know you're in Hoboken because those sirens are going off like New York City style. Second of all, there's a lot to unpack there, right? But let's just start at the beginning. Take me sort of through, we know you transferred to Walsh sort of later, in your high school career, but when did you start wrestling? You grew up in, go ahead.
I grew up in Peninsula, Ohio. I had an older brother who was 10 years older who wrestled for 2 years in high school. So he was really kind of the driving force. My parents didn't really know too much about wrestling. And between seventh and eighth grade, I kind of convinced myself that wrestling was my sport, and took off from there and just was working as hard as I could to be as good as I could, and wrestled at Revere for 2 years, and was doing pretty good, but wanted to kind of step it up a notch. And actually, funny enough, I made the cadet team and that kind of thing. And Coach Urbis was talking to me about maybe, some opportunities going to St. Ed's. So I had actually, before I went to before I got into Walsh, I got into St. Ed's, and I was talking over with my parents, and Walsh was five miles from my house, and St. Ed's was it was going to be a 45-minute drive every day. So, kind of waited out and felt like Walsh was the best option for me. Coach Urbis wrote me a recommendation to get into Walsh, so it was he just wanted me to take that next step. And so went to Walsh and jumped right in, and he once that season started, I went from kind of being nothing to being ranked 3rd in the country with 3 matchers. So it was a strange, because I was getting better and I knew that's where I was going, but it kind of happened like that. Jumped onto the big stage and wrestling with guys like Frank and Keith and Brent and Joe and Sonny and Jeff and those guys. I mean, it was just, it was sink or swim, and I loved it. It was great. It was getting in there, just knocking heads every day. And one day you go in and you don't do so good, go home, get a good night's sleep, get a good meal, and come in the next day and give back what you just got. So it was, it was amazing. It was, and Billy, as a coach, was just, he kind of had a rein, but it was a loose rein on everybody, and everybody could be their own person. And, it was perfect for what I needed at the time. And it really kind of started me off on a journey that I'd been going on, but really kind of kicked it up a notch.
Hey, Ben, I want to ask you a question real fast, and then I want to ask Viktor a question. Ben, first off, that's amazing what Coach Urbis did. But I mean, take a step back and just look at that, Ben.
Yeah.
Think about that. That is your rival, and you're writing a recommendation to get into the rival school, like a wrestler who could change your future. What percentage, Ben, of coaches in America would do that, you think?
One person, one person, Coach Urbis. I mean, that just speaks to him, but it speaks to just also the man he is of if you're not going to be with us, I still want to see you grow. I want you to go to the best place that's going to be best for you, whether or not it's with us or not. He cared more about you as a human being, more about you as a student than he did about you as a wrestler and what you're going to do for a program versus what you're going to do in the future and what was going to work best for you. And that was one of the nuggets that I picked out from that. The other one was you didn't start wrestling until 6th, 7th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, whatever. And then 3 years later, you're ranked number 1 in the country, at your weight. So, I mean, when you stepped into that room for the first time, let's back that up. 2 years you were at Revere. What made you want to make that jump to go to somewhere like Walsh? And then how did that even, cross? Because most people are just I'm here, I'm going to do my best at the school and, stay at this weight or whatever. But what was your impetus for going to Walsh?
Again, stepping it up a level. I had a younger brother who was 2 years younger, 18 months younger than I was. So my older brother was 10 years older. So he was driving us to St. Ed's every week, twice a week, driving us to Solon. I was kind of just getting out of my comfort zone and rubbing elbows with the St. Ed's guys, with all these guys, and realized that was probably I was lucky. My freshman year at Revere, we had a couple state placers, and so around my weight, and they were I could look up to them, and they were a good example. And for me at that time, it was perfect. But wrestling with my brothers in the living room and doing that kind of thing, and just wanting to be the best, and also having that kind of support. It seemed like the right thing to do. Urbis, like we were saying, just he knew something was there. He just didn't, and he was urging me to move out of my comfort zone and get into a place where I had to really compete, really work at it. My coach at Revere, I don't think he was too pleased at the time. I think he understood it in the long run. But it was just something I had to do. And once I made the decision, I was off and running.
That's amazing.
Hey, Vic, when you were at Walsh and you came in, do you remember the sign in the wrestling room? Because Billy hung signs up, motivational quotes, just like Howard Ferguson did in the St. Ed's wrestling room, Ben. And one of the quotes was, "Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard." Do you remember that quote?
Yep.
It was sitting there on the wall every day. And I don't think anybody worked harder than you that I ever experienced in my entire wrestling career. Where did you get your work ethic from?
I usually, when I set my mind to something, I want, I try to explore all avenues to make that happen. And my parents and my brothers and my older brother was 10 years older, so he could kind of start a myth going, and that was part of the myth. You're going to be the best in third period. You're going to be, and these were all things that I could, especially starting late. These were all things that I could variables I can control, and which ended up helping me in the long run, because I didn't like cutting weight, so I would go up in weight, and endurance. These kind of things were what I kind of became known for, and then those were always in my back pocket. And if you ever wrestle a guy that's good in the third period, the window starts closing, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to kind of hold your breath and go. And so it worked for my set of skills at that time. And like I said, my brother was really kind of helped push that myth, and was we're going to be in better shape than any of these guys, if anything. So that's kind of go ahead.
You were thrown right into the fire, right?
Right.
And sort of sink or swim. Did you know what you were getting into? And what was those first weeks, those first months like?
I don't know that I knew the extent of it, which it's probably a good thing. I knew that that's where I was going one way or another. So it was great. I mean, it was like everything changed. You step into a new room, and you now have to figure out that room, and you got to figure out all those guys, and the guys that we had in that room were unbelievable. So, and they were all different. That's what was unique about that. Everybody had a different style, a different thing that they were known for. And I, being new to that, and these guys have been wrestling together for 10 years by that point. So being new to that, I could kind of see how it all came together, see what, pick and choose the things that I felt would work for me, and try to adapt to that room. And it was great. It was easy. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was easy because that's what I wanted. So it just, everything, all the hard work felt easy because the goal was right there.
And Frank, what did you think of Viktor when he stepped in?
I thought he, like, coming in, like, first off, I really enjoyed Viktor personally. He was funny. He made me laugh, right? He just fit in naturally. And he's spot on. Like, there we were, a bunch of guys who had been wrestling together for a long time, right? 10 years, going back to our youth days. And he just stepped right in. I just remember when we would do our conditioning, and he wanted to win every single sprint, every single everything was competitive. And like, it was impressive to see someone his size have a gas tank like he had, because typically you don't see the bigger guys, having the best endurance, right? The heavier you go, a lot of times that you start to see a decline, and those guys are usually the last in sprints, right? As they get heavier and heavier. It wasn't that way with him. He pushed himself to a limit that I thought was like number one in our room, which I think opened our eyes because, there we were, the returning national champions, broke the all-time scoring record in Ohio, and we needed somebody to come in and kind of help us push a little bit harder and a little bit more. And Victor did that. So it was a match made in heaven, having him come in that year. It was great.
And Victor, what was it like for you two? You stepped in and your wrestling partner was Jeff Nutt. I mean, he was number one in the country at that point. And
It was, again, I had been watching these guys, they're on TV and various things. And back then we didn't have the video that we had now. So you'd have a clip of thing that you record on the VHS that was on the nightly news, and you'd watch that over and over and over again. And seeing these guys, the St. Ed's duel where they had they had like a short little documentary on that, watching that, we taped that, watch that over and over and over, and seeing these guys, and then stepping in with Jeff and taking my lumps at first, and then start, climbing my way into that. And it was great. It was, it's exactly, like I said, it's exactly what I needed at the time. And I had the energy and the want and all of that to kind of keep learning and keep moving towards that goal. And those guys were too. So, you had to get better. It just, or you didn't wrestle, or you were, so it was great. It was everything went up, like weightlifting, everything, cause these guys were competing at a different level that I was used to, and things just went if you believed in it, it went. And it was that was eye-opening for me too. Cause it's like, there's a physicality to everything, but there's a mental element that can open more than you think it can. And that was an example for me to be like, okay, wow. So I got to stay positive about this. I got to keep coming after it, and everything will eventually move in that direction. And fortunately it did.
And what did you think of Bill? Meeting Bill for the first time, what were your thoughts? And then how did that sort of evolve as you became one of his, wrestlers?
Bill was perfect. He let all of us, our egos and our characters and all of that sort of he kept a loose rein on everything. And it was fun. It was funny. It was, when he needed to get on us, he got on us. But it was, of all the coaches I've known, he had the loosest rein. He wasn't in there teaching us how to wrestle. He was making us, preparing us and putting us in front of the right people to make us be better. And he would bring in the guys that would teach us the techniques. And he kind of pushed us out from a further level, or from a kind of further out than most coaches. Most coaches are hands-on, and he was hands-on, but it was emotionally hands-on, not physically. And that was something that, as a coach now, I try to do that too, because, everything is so, you got to do this to get, and Bill was more, it was philosophy for Bill. It wasn't technical. And I loved it. It was great. He would keep me loose in my matches. And then I went on and I worked on some stuff with Bill afterwards, videos and various things, and worked with his brother a lot with music. And his brother was the same way. So it was just like, it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed at that time. And I think for that group of guys, that's why the room was the way it was, because of Bill's philosophy.
Victor, I want to ask you about, because Billy in a completely different way, right, than most do, because of the work you've done with music, right, working with him and, helping him, when he was, with Devo and the whole thing that he was up to. What's one thing that you learned about Billy that maybe no one else knows, or the knowledge that you have, what's one thing that what stands out about him that you could share that maybe other people aren't really hip to?
I mean, as long as you're moving in a positive direction, he was game for anything. There were really no boundaries, as long as it was moving in a positive direction. And we worked on a Devo the documentary that came out last year. Unfortunately, it got taken away from us through contracts and stuff like that. But he and I started that thing way back, because before my matches, there were some Devo sayings that he would always kind of loosen me up. Walk like a mannequin, roll like a tire, act on reaction, dodge the big spud flyer. And that was one of the things he used to say. It had nothing to do with wrestling, but it just was. It was what I needed at the time. He knew, I was into Devo. His brother had been a sound guy for Devo, so that was all a part of. But it had nothing to do with wrestling. It was he really kind of diverted the energy, because that energy would build up when you're getting ready for a match, and the pressure and the anxiety, and he would kind of be like, "Hey, look, the Goodyear blimp," and you'd be like, and then all of a sudden, you got to go. You're ready to wrestle. So he was just so good at that for me, because I did put a lot of pressure on myself, and I did. I did want to win as much as anybody in that room. So he didn't know me as well. So these were the kind of some things that we kind of shared those things. And with you guys, I mean, he had known you guys since you were 5, 6 years old. So I came in pretty much, he didn't even know who I was when I transferred over. And when I walked in the room, and then it started to build, then he was like, and then it took off in that, but it kind of took some other things in order to do that. And the Devo stuff was one of those things that just kind of held on. And then after I got done with college, and I had studied some graphic design and was working in film and animation and that kind of thing. He's like, "Come here, check out this stuff." He's like, "What can we do with this?" And then for the last 10 years, we had kind of been steadily working on that stuff. So it was great, because that was a whole different side of Bill that had nothing to do with wrestling. It really didn't, but it was the same kind of philosophy. I mean, his philosophy with wrestling was the same with life, and kept a loose rein on something. No boundaries, as long as you're going in the right direction. And yeah, he's pretty. I'm blessed to have spent that time with him in that zone. And I was fortunate too, because as I was getting into music, as his brother was moved to Ohio, and so he had this little studio in his, and he coached me in music the same way Bill coached me in the wrestling. He was always game for whatever you brought. I mean, he and I recorded probably 100 songs together. And I'd come back here, I'd write all kinds of stuff, and I'd come back and just, he was game for whatever. It was interesting to see. They were twin brothers too. So it was interesting to see them in two separate worlds, but how they kind of complemented each other and then complimented me. It was all positive. It was so much fun. And I learned a lot from those guys, and still do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now jumping back into the 90s, your first, you're thrown into the fire right off the bat. You guys have, I think, a quad with the Pennsylvania teams, Easton and Blair and Northampton, and you guys crush them and then go straight into the Ironman tournament. That alone right there, that quad, and then going into the Ironman tournament in the first 2 weeks of high school, has got to be just eye-opening. What was that like, just wrestling that schedule now? You saw St. Ed 7 times that year too as well. So what was that, stepping from where you were wrestling the year before into this new schedule? What was that like?
It was, again, I was hungry for it. So it didn't seem as looking in retrospect, it looks so, that's what I wanted. That's what I was going for. I had been wrestling the juniors and the cadets, so I kind of had a little bit of that. But my sophomore year, I didn't even make it to districts, and then those first 3 matches, I somehow pinned all 3 of them, and then I went from nobody in Ohio knowing my name to being in the third in the country at that point, and it was just 3 matches. So it was like that made everything that I was dreaming of possible, and I didn't know how possible it was until then, and so it just fired me up more. It just made me go, all right, I'm here now. Now let's make the best of the kind of the platform that I got, and it all went hand in hand, and you just kind of and then wrestling St. Ed 7 times, and Ironman. I was there at the first Ironman, watching that, just dreaming, watching these guys, watching Heskett, watching Avis and these guys, it was I was a fan at that point, and it went from being a fan to being one of the crew, and it was like, all right, it was fun. It was great. Nothing better.
That's great. What now? You'd been to the Ironman before, but had you ever been to a St. Ed's Walsh dual meet before?
I had not. No.
But did you know about the buildup, about the rivalry? Like, where did you start to pick that up?
There was a video that we had taped off of, I don't know, some Cleveland news that did a little documentary leading up to that, and we would watch that over and over and over again. We had that and the Gable Supreme video, and again, back then you only had a couple of things that you could really, which was good and bad. I think that there's something to be said for both. That was something that, so that buildup was through the TV, through kind of far removed. And, so I knew what I was dealing with. Also, I knew the legacy that St. Ed's had. I knew what Walsh was doing at that point, to close that gap. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's see what we can do to help that. And, it was great. It really was.
But that first dual meet in '96, for those that don't know, it was a very tragic event. But talk me through that. Going into it, you think everything's going to go smoothly. It's going to lead up to you at one point. You're going to wrestle. What was your nerves, thoughts going into that match? And then talk about what happened and how you felt.
I was nervous, but I was happy. It's similar to like when I first started playing music, right? There's butterflies, and then after a while, those butterflies are good because it means you're anxious for something that's going to happen. And if you're prepared, then that something can be really good. And I had wrestled the guy Philo, I think it was Matt, and I wrestled him a couple times that year, and I felt like I had the better of that exchange for those times. So the pressure always adds a little bit, but I liked I needed the pressure at that point to learn what I was capable of. And unfortunately it didn't get past the tragic event of the referee passing away, which was, I only have vague recollections of that. And I do remember the funeral but it was just such a strange, surreal moment for all of us, I think. And and so it was definitely an event that kind of looms in all of our minds.
Everyone I talk to talks about how it's just they'll never forget. Frank was there, and what that was just like to a build up to something, but then something so tragic as the passing, just sort of peaks and valleys, right?
Right.
But then you went on that year to do really well, but you didn't necessarily you didn't qualify for the state tournament. You were 2 tight matches away. I think they were both 1-point matches, I read.
To 2 guys that I'd beaten the week previous. The one guy I almost I think I teched the week before and then started just clamping up. I wasn't there yet. It was a good thing, I think, for me ultimately. Just because I just, the anxiety got there and it got to me, and it was I learned a lot from that. But it was a disappointment, but it made me work hard for that. That spring, I made the world team, and then I took second at juniors. So it really gave me some fire to start learning my own anxieties and figuring out what I was doing to get my own way.
Vic, I want to ask you because I was there, right? And I remember you not, it was a huge shock that you didn't make the state tournament based off of the wins you had against the guys who you were wrestling, right? And then the season's over and I go away, right? And then next thing you know, you go undefeated, right? As a senior, you win the high school nationals, right? I mean, you're like at a completely different level. You hear coaches talk about get 1% better every day, right? It seems like you were getting like 5 and 10% better every day. How were you doing that? How did you jump so many levels in such a short amount of time?
I think I was ready for it before. There were just a couple little tweaks that I needed to do in order to kind of believe in myself. And that again, that summer I made the world team, wrestled in Moscow, took second at juniors, which was that, because up to that point I hadn't done anything I took third at Ironman, but that was about as good. So that really kind of set the gears together and kind of made it all go. And then that early on in that year, I signed with Indiana for a full ride, and just those kind of things. That just helped supported the myth that I was building in my own mind. And I went up a couple weight classes. I started lifting, and I got up to about 210, and which helped me because, again, my endurance was a huge factor in a lot of that. That was also before all the states had 215. So I wrestled a lot of heavyweight and actually I got recruited a couple of college. Bruce Baumgartner recruited me to be a heavyweight in college, which wasn't going to happen, but I was moving in that direction. I was getting bigger. I was, things were just, I think I was maturing as an individual too. And everything was moving in the right direction. And things just, the 1% became 5%, and I was hungry for it. So I wasn't going to let any of those percentages go away.
So it was that summer wrestling that you think took you from an experience in success on that high level?
I think it proved to me that I could do it. I think even up to that point and at the mentor districts and all that, I probably wasn't quite sure that I was going to do it, because it's almost, the other stuff came so fast that it was almost like, oh wait, is that real or not? And I got a couple quick pins on a couple of those things, and I'm like, so I didn't quite, it wasn't set in my mind yet. And then that summer, wrestling some of these guys would just, and beating them. And then I was like, okay, this is real now. Let's start. And then that senior year, we just went out firing. I think I pinned the first 15 guys, and we were all kind of moving in that direction. So it seemed easy at the time.
Yeah, you guys ran it up. You ran it up. I'm sorry, you ran it up on your senior year. You guys, 5 seniors, all 5 state champs, and made it to the finals. But what was that like, because that was also the year that you guys dropped to Division II. So you had
Right.
1 year where you came in and you were Division I and you saw St. Ed 7 times a year. And then your next year, and you didn't qualify for the state tournament. And then your next year you come in, you're ranked number 1 in the country, you're pinning everybody, but you're now Division II, you're seeing St. Ed's only twice a year. And did you see a considerable change, drop, effects starting to happen?
I mean, whoever you shook hands with, you were going, it was that kind of thing. And it was, the Division II we wrestled a lot of the Division I guys. But it was different. St. Ed's also had that next year where I think they had a little bit of a down year that year. So remember we wrestled them in the duel, which was, it was,
Yeah, what was that first? That was your very first dual meet. So that you've been in that environment, right? But you didn't actually stepped on the mat. Now this is the first time you stepped on the mat. So what was that like to actually, do it?
It was amazing. It was great. It was, I had the guy that I had wrestled, we had been training and wrestling together. So I kind of knew how it was going to be going into it. And I just, and we was building up to a certain point and had to get some things done, and we got it done. So it was amazing. It was being a part of that was, especially from watching it to then being a part of it was all the more special.
Do you think Coach Urbis was sitting there saying, "Why did I write this kid a recommendation?"
No, he was happy for me. That's the kind of guy he was and is. And I knew that then, and I know that now. So he was a special guy. He opened a big window for me when he showed some interest, and that it was really all the difference in a lot of ways, because I wouldn't have been where I was at, and it was special.
And then you go on. So like you mentioned before, you were recruited by Indiana. You signed with them, and you're off after winning a state title. What was it about Indiana that attracted you and made you want to compete at that level?
Well, I kind of wanted to go Big Ten because I knew that's kind of the way my style of wrestling just, and I wanted to wrestle all those guys, and back then was a little different than now. I mean, my freshman year at Indiana, I was 46 and 8 or something like that. I mean, it was like we wrestled a lot, and I think now it's a little hard. It's a little harder now because there's video of everything. And so you can kind of scout differently now. But back then it was, at least for me, it was about getting as many quality matches as I could. And that's how I got better. Indiana had, Dwayne Goldman was the coach, and he was roughly my size. They had a guy in there, Mike Powell, who was had been an All-American, around my weight. So it was, it just felt like a good fit for me. It was out of state, which I didn't really care, but it was nice to get away a little bit and see a different part of the country and that kind of thing. And, and I was excited to get there and start working right away.
And you ran into a couple of St. Ed's guys in college too, correct?
Yep.
Who were some of those guys that you ended up wrestling?
Well, I wrestled Andy Hrovat many times. We would always go back. It was just never a fun match. Never. It was always, he just couldn't. Yeah, it was.
He mentioned that it was the hardest, one of the hardest matches he'd ever wrestled. I think he said of two matches, one was in the Olympic trials and one was you.
That was my last match that I think I ever wrestled too. So that was, it was, and I had wrestled him the year previously. We met in the Blood Rounds in 2002, and then in 2001, I wrestled him for third and fourth. So it was just always a battle, and he was, just a supreme competitor, and then he went on to do even more, which it was great. What's nice once you get done with wrestling and you stop competing with these guys, you then start rooting for these guys, and you watch what they're doing, and it's good for your ego, and it's good for the sport. It's good for everything. And he was one of those guys that was just like watching him continue it on. And cause at that point I was done with wrestling. I had other things that I wanted to kind of investigate about the world. And he was continuing it, and it was, I could kind of live vicariously through that. And that's what's great about wrestling, is it's an individual sport that you can, watch guys 103 all the way up to heavyweight, and you can pull something from every one of them that you can use. And I don't know of another sport that really has that I guess intimacy. You really see the technique, and you can pull it from everybody, and then to watch them go on to do what they do is pretty unbelievable.
When was the last time you saw Andy?
We've hung out recently, probably in the last year, but it's always a good time, and we always just kind of shake our heads and go, "Oh, thank God that's over."
Nice. Well, listen, we like to do things on the Dynasty Effect where we reunite people who haven't seen each other in a while, part of this thing. So we wanted to bring Andy on. He was excited because the last time we had him on, he spoke about how he had the toughest match in the world with you. So we want to bring Andy on to the Dynasty Effect. Here's Andy Hrovat, everyone.
And Andy Hrovat.
This is Andy Hrovat.
Andy Hrovat.
Andy Hrovat.
Andy Hrovat from Lakewood St. Ed.
Second and third in the Cadet Nationals.
A 3-time state placer and 2-time state champion.
3-time All-American.
Olympian in 08.
He's also an international coach.
Pretty impressive.
Got a little future ahead of him.
Andy's going to be going to Michigan and also have Olympic aspiration.
Andy. Coach Andy.
Andrew Hrovat.
Andy. All right, so let's get started.
Good. How you guys? Thanks for having me.
What's up, Kevin?
I hit it on Victor.
How's it going? So we got Andy in Texas. We got Victor in Hoboken, New Jersey. I'm in New York. Frank's in Ohio. We got everyone spread out over here. So how are you all doing? Andy, how's Texas treating you?
Good. Just busy. I'm leaving tonight to go watch the kids at the state tournament that I'm training. So driving down to Houston, got 14 kids competing this weekend. So it'll be a good time.
Nice. Now, Victor said that you guys met not too long ago, reunited. You guys hang out. Talk about that. Where do you guys see each other?
Yeah, man. So after that last match we had, I had people coming up to me like, "Hey, man, have you seen Victor?" I was like, "No, I haven't seen Victor since college, since that last match." And people are like, "Dude, nobody knows where he's at." And the story I heard was that he went to a cabin in the woods, taught himself how to play music. And it wasn't until that was so 2002. This wasn't until 2013. I hadn't seen him in 11 years. And I was at Beat the Streets with Jimmy Kennedy or Cael Russell. And I go to the party the night before for a lot of the big donors and the coaches. And so I go out there, and I'm at Mike Novogratz' house in Tribeca, I believe. And so I'm in the house, and I hear this piano playing, and I'm like, "Oh, just listening to music." I walk around the corner, and no other Viktor Sveda just on the piano, just playing. I'm like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me!" And that was the first time we saw each other. And then we ran into each other a bunch, when I've been in New York City and Jeff Marsh's wedding and Michigan, who was running Beat the Streets at the time. So it's always good to see Victor.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And Victor, what Andy mentioned to us before that you were the hardest match and the most conditioned person he had ever wrestled. What was it like to wrestle Andy on your side?
You couldn't prepare for it. You just did something. He was going to find a weakness and go and exploit it, and you had to. Again, we would go round and round, and it was like every other match. He would get me, then I would get him, and he would get, and then it was great. I mean, it was, and it was also not great. It was great when you won, and it was not great when you lost, and then you had to pick it up, and you had to go, all right, what do I got to do to because we wrestled in the All-Star duel too that year, the senior year. And you double legged me right at the last. Oh man.
That was actually the first time I beat you. So to be honest, so first time, because I have my old matches and I've been looking at them. And the first time we wrestled University Nationals, I think after your redshirt sophomore year, my sophomore year of college. And then the following year, I'm pretty sure you beat me in the dual meet and NCAAs, right, that junior year. And then I didn't beat you until the All-Star meet.
We didn't wrestle. Because I don't think we wrestled Michigan that year. So, we wrestled there and then damn blood round.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have that match. I'd
last
love to
match.
pull it up.
Last match I ever wrestled.
That's amazing. I did not know.
Except for when we
No, I did not know that was your last match. That's fantastic to hear. We got your last college match ever. I want to pull that up. I'd love to hear what you guys think as you walk through it. I know it's a tight one, but it's very interesting when I went back and rewatched that. So let me pull that up real quick and we'll take a look, and I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. All right. So there's no volume to this. So why don't you guys just take us through what you guys are thinking, what you guys are feeling. You guys will be the official commentators for this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like when I was wrestling Viktor, it's like he just moved so different. Like he was kind of like Askren-esque, where it's like he could just his body, like you would grab him, and it's like very like not elusive, but it's like you don't have anything to grab, right? And so that caught me off guard for a long time. Very Gumby, as you could see here.
Yeah, he went straight for the ankle. That seems to be what everyone's doing now instead of a sprawl. It's just jumping to the ankle right away. That was an old 2001 move, Viktor. A lot of rolling, a lot of anaconda. Look at that.
Wow.
Nothing fun about it.
This is big. You guys are 184 pounders, right?
A lot of work for no points.
No points.
Yeah, I think this is where you give it up. Went for an inside trip.
Yeah.
There it is. There's the two.
Yeah, and just like overall in this match, like I actually showed this to my wrestlers on Tuesday and Monday. And, I just told them, I had to talk to them about that. It's like, they're getting ready for the state tournament and they want to win. And they have all these preconceived notions. And it's like, Viktor and I were like number 1, number 2 in the country at times that year. And, we were 3rd and 4th the year before, Viktor beating me at NCAAs. And it's like, there's going to be some times in a tournament, it's like, you got to get your mind right. It's like, we were 3rd and 4th the year before, and now we're wrestling in a blood round. And it's like, yeah, it wasn't what either of us expected. But what wrestling forces you to do is face yourself, and to me, this was even bigger, right? Because it wasn't just college. This goes back all the way to high school, St. Ed's, Walsh. And, this was a huge match that neither of us expected to be having in this moment.
So right now it's 5-1. I think it's second period. Man, coming at you. Still got that Walsh in you. Pushing in the face. And who else was also in your weight class? You had Askren. You had
Rob.
No.
Rob Roan won the weight class. He beat Lambert.
Yeah, this was when he was losing by 14 in the finals and got the pin.
Yeah. Hrovat was, I think, the first match I wrestled at Walsh in that tri-move.
No way, really?
Yeah.
That's wild. I didn't know that. He was strong.
Yeah, he was something else.
From Nazareth, right?
Yeah. Either Northampton.
I thought it was Northampton.
Northampton.
Okay.
So he was one of those guys. Yeah, he just.
So it's 5-2 right now. You're shooting low singles for a big dude.
You
guys are rolling around like little guys.
Yeah, like I said, like it was really hard. Like even when I had like good attacks on Viktor, it's like it was so hard to finish. You know, it's like I just remember like being so exhausted after this match, I couldn't do anything. You know, that's why I said to me it was probably the number one hardest match of my life. You know, just the weight of NCAAs and, you know, the rivalry from, you know, high school all the way to college. And, you know, having a guy that beat you for third the year before, you know, it was like definitely the most mental challenging match I've ever had.
Yeah, I think that's where you get it right there. You get a 2-2 on the back, and then it becomes just a royal scramble. I think it's a little
Time
too
for whatever
much
I can get.
I think it's 10-4 minute left, and I think, funny enough, Viktor starts coming back.
Yes, he does. I was just happy I had points.
I didn't want to lose. That was going to be it. I kind of knew it at the time, and I was like.
Did your guys' matches all go like this? Like back and forth
pretty
like
much.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all pretty. I don't think they were ever low scoring.
No. And it always came down pretty close to the end.
Yeah, well, that was the Andy's voted his tied for his hardest match he's ever wrestled in his life. So
if we had a tiebreaker, it's definitely the hardest. Like I said, I just remember I couldn't really finish the tournament after that match. I was so exhausted. I lost my next match to Clint Wattenberg and barely scraped by for 7th. But it was mentally, physically, emotionally exhausting. You know, because I said on my podcast, you know, like Viktor was the one that drove me, you know, that last part of my college. I knew he was the toughest guy in the weight class when Sanderson went up. And, you know, it started in like 2000 and then we wrestled at the University Nationals. And it's like every extra training session, I literally was standing in front of a mirror in Chrysler Center thinking about Viktor. You know, it was like that dude, like, because he was beating me. And I was like, man, like, if I want to be the best, I got to beat this guy, you know, and that's what this whole rivalry, you know, brought out in people. I was just fortunate to be able to have it in high school, kids, college, international. And, you know, you just get so grateful to those people that pushed you in your life. You know, there's no bad blood or, you know, any negativity. It was just, I got to beat this guy. It's like you figure out a way and, you know, he probably had that same feeling towards me. And, but when you have those rivalries, it's like, and I always tell my kids, the rivalries, like one match here and there, it doesn't matter. But it's those people you keep seeing that keep popping up that are going to make you great, right? They could either break you or make you great. And if that's what you really want, it's like, you know, you have two people that are fighting for the exact same thing, right? And you have to be willing to take it away and, you know, figure that part out. And, you know, I'm just so grateful that we had that rivalry and, you know, that it, you know, extended all the way back to high school. You know, it was amazing time to say the least.
Andy, do you think you're an Olympian without Viktor?
No. But I also mentioned that in my podcast, you know, like, that we filmed last week or whatever. And, you know, I told you it started off, you know, when his coach made the Olympic team and I was at the training camp and there weren't a lot of college kids back then, but I was like, man, like I'm sitting here training with his coach every single day, getting him ready for the Olympics, you know, and it's like that training camp was what really sparked my understanding of how to be able to become an Olympian, because I was training with Charles and after practice, brands were like, no, Joe needs a partner. You're going to go another practice. And so like, I was doing like 4 days at 20 years old. I didn't care, but I was like, I was eating it up. And it's like, but it was him who started that, because it's like, I wanted to try to beat him, because I hadn't yet. And, I'm training with his coach and I'm at the Olympic camp. And so that really sparked it. Like, I think I could really do this, yeah, like I said, it's those rivals that really push you to the next level.
And Victor, what did the rivalry with Andy and sort of him actually being your last match, what did that teach you about yourself?
I was glad I wasn't gonna have to wrestle again. That's for sure. I watch Andy. We watched him wrestle Joe in the finals. Watched it. Just kind of watched him grow up, and it was growing up myself. And then seeing what he did. That was so special for me, because I kind of let go. And then I started, watching and rooting. Not that I was always rooting for Andy when I wasn't wrestling Andy, except if it was like maybe right ahead, it's like, oh, am I gonna have to wrestle Andy? Well, maybe. But then rooting for these guys, and then I'm watching what they're doing. It just was like, it was so much fun. It was like, because it pulled me up with them. It was Cael's another guy that was like, I think when I was wrestling, I was rooting for him as I was wrestling me, which is a hard thing to do. And watching Joe compete and these guys that just supreme competitors, and they brought everything, so you had to bring everything. Otherwise, it wasn't even gonna be close. And being around that and competing with that really was amazing. It really was. It was.
That's awesome. Now, what before we let Andy go, what sort of would you like to say to Andy, or Andy, guys like to say to each other before you bounce? And in that, what sort of, I mean, Andy, you're still using your match with Victor as a teaching tool for your kids, so he still has an effect on you today. So, summing it up, before you guys go, final thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just want to say I'm grateful for Victor, right? Like, even though it's like, when you're in that moment, it's really difficult and it's tough, and but it's your drive, right? And without that, it's like, where are you going to be if you're just beating people and there's no competition? And so I was always just grateful for him, right? Because it was always in the back of my mind. I was going to have to wrestle him eventually, right? And knowing I had to wrestle him eventually, I had to live a good life. I had to train hard. I had to do the extra work. And, you had to work on your mind, because every one of those matches were a barn burner. And so I'm just really grateful for that time where we competed against each other. And, it's something I'm going to remember the rest of my life. So that's why I always love seeing him, being able to spend time with him. And I'm just happy that he's back involved with the sport. And, being in New York City, he's obviously at the edge right now. And, I just really enjoy seeing him. So thank you, Victor.
And Vic, what would you like to say to Andy before you say goodbye?
One of my heroes.
It's perfect. Awesome. Yeah. Andy, well, thank you for coming on. I know when I told you we were having Victor on, you were super excited. But I know you wanted to see that match just because you did have a win against him that you were proud of. So
to be honest, that was the first time I'd seen that match since that match.
We're just setting records here. We got first time seeing matches.
A lot of first times
before.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, thank you very much. It was great seeing you. Have a great day. Good luck at the tournament.
Thank you, Andy.
Be well, buddy.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
That's great. I didn't know that you guys had seen each other so often. And I mean, it makes sense. He's here a lot. I see him when he comes into town, especially when he was at the NYAC. But let's get into that too. Like, how did you end up in New York, New Jersey area after school?
Well, I coached at Kent for a year. I was in Colorado for a couple of years, just working at a bike store and kind of just working on various things. I was doing a lot of video work and that kind of thing, and just wanted to get out of the Midwest for a little bit and get into a different zone. Went out to Colorado for a couple of years. Then I came home for a year and coached at Kent for a year. And then a buddy of mine got the job at Montclair State. I wrestled James Torres. He wrestled with me at Indiana. And so he said, "Hey, you want to just come out?" It was a D3 school, but didn't pay a lot, but he's like, "I'll take care of room and board and we coach." And that was kind of the deal we had, and got out here, and I loved just the energy and it was just a different part of the world, and did that for a year. And then actually Montclair State ended up dropping the program. So I was looking for something and called Columbia and I became the volunteer assistant at Columbia, which kind of cooked me up with the guys here at the Edge. And it's been, you haven't looked back, just kind of, I'm over here more at the Edge now, doing some coaching and a lot, it's wrestling philosophy and such. So it's not as much hands-on stuff, but more working with the guys. And like I said, we got the RTC trains out of here. We got Hoboken High School trains out of here, Hoboken Middle School. So it's lots of wrestling going on, and I'm still connected to the sport and love it. I mean, I wouldn't be out here otherwise. And then I'm also doing my music, which I approach in a similar fashion that I did with my wrestling. So that's also a 24-hour a day focus.
Vic, tell me about Viktor Digital. Tell me about it. Like, what's when did you start it? How did you get yourself involved with it? Were you a trained musician prior? Tell me about it.
I didn't play music. So I was working on this Devo documentary. So Bill and I had started this. When I was in Montclair, I got connected with the guy that was the head of the film department there. And so he really took a liking to what we were working on. And I had done a lot previous to that. And so he and I kind of partnered up on this. And so we started using the equipment from the school and all of that stuff. And unfortunately, the guy didn't turn out to be the guy, the partner that I thought he would. And so he kind of started taking the project over from me. And we were out in LA, and I was we were doing Devo working on shooting them, filming them in different capacities. And I was staying with a buddy who was a musician. And so this was probably in 2010, something like that. And I've picked up the guitar, and I always loved music, and I was like, all right. And the film wasn't going in the direction that I wanted it to. It was kind of getting pulled away from me in ways that I didn't quite know how to manage at the time. So I started getting into music, and I had a space here, which here in Hoboken, there's not a lot of space. So if you're in your apartment, it's hard to really open up. But I had this gym here at night. Nobody's in here at night, and I could sound as bad as so I just kind of started from scratch, from chaos, and just started making my way towards what I thought music was, both singing and I've been doing a lot of writing, kind of long form writing, which I liked, but wrestling has a performance element to it, and I was missing it. And music has them, and you can work on it by yourself, and you can work on it with a team. You can, with wrestling, that's what wrestling is. And so it had a lot of similarities to wrestling that I just was like, all right, this is the next thing. I think people in their 30s have a hard time failing. I was okay with it for a long time. I know the people around me didn't quite, when I told my parents, I'm like, no, I'm working on music now. And they're like, the heck are you talking about? I'm like, no, don't worry. I'm working on music. They know now, but it was like for a long time, it was an uphill climb. And so I kind of built my own little world with that, and then put a band together, and really haven't looked back at, various, music you can put together in various forms. You can work on it by yourself. You can go in the studio, you get the band together, you write with people, so there's a lot of things that I'm exploring now and trying to kind of build that. I wouldn't say it's a brand, but it's I guess my digital interface. And then playing as much as I can live. I haven't been recently, but I'm getting in the studio. I'm actually going to the studio this weekend and constantly writing songs, and they all sort of evolved in this strange way, like wrestling. You work on a double A, you work on a double A, you work on a double A. You forget about the double leg, and all of a sudden you're doing your double leg in a match. It was just the next phase of what I was working on, and I haven't stopped learning. I've been working at it now pretty consistently for about 10 years, and continuing to write every day, and it's an exploration in time, and it's exploration in the way I learn, and it's exploration in how to communicate with other people. Technology is also involved in it, which is cool, and I don't get too far into that, but it's a parallel track that allows me to learn, because the technology that these people are using to get their sounds across, you're always taking note of it, and yeah, it's just it's my world now, so it's great, and it complements the wrestling because I learn a lot about myself, and then I learn a lot about different things that I can instill in the guys that are either coaching or wrestling. And it's the next page.
That's fantastic, man. And
Yeah.
so you've released 9 albums. What would you who would you compare your sound to? How would you describe your sound, or to somebody who maybe hadn't heard your music?
I write all the time. I mean, it's like a song's like a wrestling match. It's about the same time. And so you kind of go into these things, and you don't know how they're gonna. When you write the first lyric, you don't know how the end is gonna happen, and sort of honing my skills with reading. There's a lot of various things that you can do that inspire that. So I read a lot. I listen to a lot. Inspired by movies, inspired by what's going on in the real world, and I filter it through myself, and continue to do that every day. Try to write a song every day, and so they a lot of times they end up being the songs back to back, end up being the same song, but that evolves into something else that then becomes different, and then you can kind of mix and match them, and and video and various things like that. I am still very interested in that, so I'm constantly working on various levels that then, when I get an album together, I usually have a bunch of videos that go along with that, because I'm the same frame of mind when I'm doing it, and just gathering digital material to then release. I probably have 10 other albums, just all in various forms that need to be worked on. So it's just a constant collection of things.
Hey, Ben, I was thinking about that same question that you asked. Victor, or comparable. Like, and I don't think there is a comparable, and that's what makes Victor's stuff so unique. He's got really I love his singing voice. It's unique. You don't sound like anyone else, and you have really I like your eclectic guitar riffs too. Like you just have a unique sound. So everyone's your Instagram stuff, you got a ton of stuff out there. People got to check it out.
You're at victor.digital, right? That's your handle?
Yeah, Victor.digital. Yep.
Great. Yeah, we'll put that down in the show
Or
notes.
no, I'm sorry. The Instagram is digital.victor.
Yeah. Okay, we'll put that down in the show notes so you can follow his music. But it's great. I listened to a bunch of it. You got a ton of stuff on Spotify.
Yeah.
And so where is the best place that you've performed? In New York City, in Cleveland, around the world? Where,
mostly the crew that I had, like my band and everything, is based out of Jersey, New York area. So I haven't really done much in Ohio. Not much at all. I want to get to that. Promotion for me is a hard thing. I like working on it. That's a whole other element. And I've had people out here that have helped me get zones. There's a really cool space here in Jersey, White Eagle Hall, that I played at, the Bitter End in New York, various places in New York. Nothing too huge, but constantly working on my own thing, and then every once in a while things will just pop up, and I'm ready to go whenever that's, because that's a whole other performance, is a whole other ball game. So it's I love that aspect of it too, and songwriting to me is probably my favorite part, because you just add all the things that you're kind of going on in your head, and you put it out, and but learning also how to capture the sound that I'm doing every day is a unique experience too, because it's curated in certain ways, and then you realize, okay, this is something, let me try it this way, and I have all kinds of different avenues yet to explore. So excited about that.
That's awesome. What now? Where or when do you feel that you'll be releasing anything new? Are you playing soon? Do you have a new album on the way? Anything that
I'm getting in. I have a bunch of. I've been working I've finally gotten the setup for myself where I feel comfortable with. So the last album I released, I did it all by myself, which is it's hard because you have to have all the tech. Everything has to be right, because when you push record and you go to play, it's different than you have somebody go 1, 2, 3, go. It's amazing some of the psychological things that go on when you're performing or when you're recording, and these are various aspects that I'm learning about because these technologies are new. But I finally got into that. So I have another album that I'm in the process of producing of my own, where I recorded everything. I'm going to get in the studio this weekend and work on a song that I'm excited about. So we'll see. I mean, I like to write in album form just because I write so much that they kind of come together in these clumps. But sometimes it's not always the easiest for people to get a whole chunk of stuff. It's easier. So this song that I do this weekend, maybe a release in the next couple of weeks, could be fun. But just exploring different ways of getting it out there and getting it to people, and trying to connect through through these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get our audience on your tracks for sure. And it's very similar to what we're doing with Clash of Dynasties, with the podcast. So anyone out there listening, check out Victor's music. And what my last question on music, what instrument do you play? Instruments, if you play.
I mean, I played mostly guitar, and I play some piano, and the singing, which again, uh, up till about 10 years ago, I wouldn't even sing in the shower. Like it was, but I have some things that I feel strongly about, and I'm learning how to use it as an instrument. I feel probably strongest with my singing and my lyrical content. Um, but as I get better at that, the guitar gets better, the piano gets better. Any instrument really, if I focus on it, I can, it, maybe not too well, but I can make a horn squeak. I can, make a drum beat. I can various things like that, and then I'm learning to get better at those things. And a lot of it's just confidence. A lot of it's uh, accepting failure first, but not as failure, as a kind of um, as a bridge to wherever it is you're going. And I love that part about music. It's all kind of attached. I love that about wrestling because it was so individual that you if nobody else was in the room, you could still work towards that goal. And I love that about it's so true to life in general. And so um, yeah, that's
Vic, I love your lyrics, man. You're a great songwriter. You make me think when I listen to your music, and you make me think about things, and that's right, the purpose of it. It makes to get people to think in a world where we don't think as much, right, as we used to. So, I love your passion for it. I think it's excellent, and thank you for doing it. Thank you for going out there and putting that out there, because as you know, it's hard to put yourself out there and do something completely new and, redefine yourself, reinvent yourself, so to speak, right? And you're doing that, man. So super proud of you.
Yeah, man, shining the spotlight, center stage. I think your wrestling career prepared you for what you're doing. Are there any future goals, wants, desires, needs that you hope to accomplish in the future that you're now set your sights on?
um, yeah, just be the best person I can be and keep working on the things that I'm working on, and be thankful for the things that I've been lucky to have. It's those kind of things. Nothing specific. Uh, just continuing to battle at it every day.
It's amazing. And one last thing we like to do is get your Mount Rushmore of wrestling. Who are the 4 or 5, whoever many people you want to put in this monument? Who are the people that you look up to, that you would, shine a light on in the sport of
Well,
wrestling?
I would say Cael Sanderson is doing things that again, when I was rooting for him when I was wrestling him, and that's a strange place to be in because and just watching him do what he's done has been it's it's amazing. He wrestled with Joe Heskett at Iowa State, and I'm telling you, Joe Heskett might be the most competitive person I've ever uh, just been around and been lucky to be around and to compete with. Um, uh, Kendall Cross, he coaches out of here now. I get to see him. Just a unique watching him. That was right as I was coming up and watching him beat the Brands brothers, who were amazing. Uh, Jordan Burroughs is amazing. Bruce Baumgartner. Uh, all- uh, uh, who else? Satyev, and right, Sajalayev was amazing. These guys those are the guys I watch now because their technique comes from a totally different place. So I like to watch that, and I feel like I get the most out of that via the watching it through video. Some of those guys are unbelievable, but Jordan Burroughs that guy was just a consummate champion. He just is constantly doing things that you're like salute. So
That,
those are the guys.
that's a strong list. Very strong list. Frank, anything else before we say goodbye to Victor?
Victor, give me the Billy Barger one more time. As long as you're progressing, as long as you're one more time.
What's that?
The Billy Barger, what you said Billy would always tell you. As long
No
as
boundaries as long as you're going in the right direction.
No boundaries as long as you're going in the right direction. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's amazing. We all love Bill and, hope for him and the best of his family. So thank you, Victor, for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to say before you say goodbye?
I thank you guys for continuing this. This is great. It's got me to think about some things I haven't thought about for a long time. And I guess I was probably kind of scared of it. Now I'm no longer scared of it. Watching that match was again, there was a reason why I hadn't, and there's a reason why I did today with you guys. And thank you for putting it out there and inviting me to be a part.
Thank you for being such a great sport and for being a part of just our Dynasty effect.
And your dad, by the way, another guy that was coached me, he didn't say a lot, but you knew exactly what he was saying.
Doesn't say a lot ever. So, but yes, great coach. I'm glad he had an effect on you as well.
For sure.
And thank you for continuing to be a coach and pass that down to generations on this coast. Hope to see you soon. All the best. And thank you for being a part of our show and a part of just what you do with wrestling and the sport.
Hope to see you guys soon.
Take care, man. All the best.
Thanks, Vic.
That was awesome. Frank, I mean, you knew Victor more than I did, but I mean, great guest and so different than all of our guys. I'm like, Andy brought up, like, it was so hard to find research on Victor, right? Online. He's got a small footprint, but, I love the fact that he's just artistic and is in a completely different mode, but it flows. He reminds me of my dad, which you brought up there at the end. It's being an artist and being a wrestler. And there is a parallel. There is a commonality, a common thread between those two of just, like a martial art. So thank you for suggesting we bring Victor on. What'd you think?
Yeah, he's everything that made him successful on the wrestling mat is now making him successful in music. And it's so cool to see those skills transfer, right? Because at the end of the day, wrestling is always going to be such a small part of our life, but it's going to be a big part of our life because of the way it impacts us and what we take and what we learn and the lessons from it. So, it just is another example that shows that we were so fortunate to be involved in this sport.
Yeah. So. And like you said, he put the diligent skills, persistence into, honing a craft in music. And it makes me envious because I always wanted to, learn the instrument. I'm sure we all do, but you got to start. You got to do it. You got to put in the work. Right. And he did. And now he's a professional musician. So kudos to him. I think it's an amazing ripple in the Dynasty effect. And I'm glad that we brought him on. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us.
Self-taught though, right? I mean, like to think about, imagine teaching yourself how to wrestle.
People are doing that now on YouTube, right? But yeah.
Yeah. But like piano, not just a guitar, which he isn't like for the people who are still listening to this, this guy can play. I mean, he's extremely talented and, it's just super impressive. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Links to his music below. Check it out, and we'll check you out on the next episode of the Dynasty Effect. Enjoy. If you like us, subscribe and follow, and please tell a fellow wrestler friend. All the best, Frank. We'll see you next time.
See you, brother.
The story needs to be told just for the fact that it was a great time for high school sports. It really was.
You got the bad boys here and you got the good guys here. And then they went at it for 10 years.
It was a strong narrative with a good arc to it. And I think people could see that it wasn't going to be replicated anytime soon.
Look back on it.
Like you're doing a podcast on it right now.
Like that's how big it was, and that's what I wanted to be a part of.
At the end of the day, it was trying to help kids become their best selves at a really high level. And so from that stance, it's a story that's very American.
I think that's a good way to explain it.